From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. Massachusetts has been the center of several high-profile international incidents. Most recently, the Boston Marathon bombings and the arrest and trial of fugitive mobster Whitey Bulger. The Federal Bureau of Investigations has been at the center of the resolutions of these and other investigations, from terrorism to gangs to political corruption. And now the man in charge of investigations in the Boston office has announced he's stepping down, but not before talking to us. So joining us today, we have FBI Special Agent Richard Delorier joining us, a Longmeadow native who has announced his retirement after a 26-year career with the FBI. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Laura. Great to be here today.
Yeah, it's an impressive career that you have, that's for sure.
Well, 26 and a half years is a good tenure for an agent.
It certainly is. Talk to me about this decision to step down. First of all, it must not have been an easy one, or maybe it was.
No, it's never an easy one, Laura, to step down after doing something for 26 and a half years. It's been a marvelous career. I leave with just a deep love of the FBI. I will always respect it as an institution, and I will cherish its extraordinary people who serve our country so bravely. But every FBI agent faces mandatory retirement when they hit 57 years old, and so I'm about 53 and a half now, so not that I'm bumping up against that too soon, but an opportunity presented itself to me back in March, about a month before the bombings, with Penske Corporation out in the greater Detroit, Michigan area, in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. And it's something I pursued, and I start with the Penske Corporation as a Vice President of Corporate Security on July 29th.
That's great. What exactly are you going to be doing there? What does the job entail?
It's a broad range of security responsibilities across their corporate structure, Laura, and just general corporate security responsibilities in a variety of different areas.
Let me ask you, when you took off from Longmeadow, when you went off to college, did you ever see your career taking you as far as it has?
No, I didn't. In fact, when I left Longmeadow and went to college in the fall of 1978, I never dreamed I would have been an FBI agent. It's just something that I hadn't thought of as I was growing up, and it's something I sort of almost stumbled into when I was at law school down in Washington, D.C. in the early to mid-1980s. So, but it's a career decision and a career choice that I have never regretted.
Well, you've certainly worked your way up the ranks, and you've been a part of a lot of major events here in Massachusetts. I'm curious, when you look back at your career, what are some of the moments that you will just take with you forever? Something that just stands out and you'll always remember. There must be a few, I would imagine.
I think that there have been very many over the years, Laura. Three that stand out most recently here during my time in Boston and immediately preceding this time was the Russian illegals investigation, the Russian spy network that the FBI and other partners disrupted back in the summer of 2010, in June and July of 2010. That was a very, very significant long-term investigation that focused on a group of Russian agents here inside the United States. And to see them convicted in a court of law and sent back to Russia, that was very, very significant for us. And that was an investigation I was personally involved in here in Boston for many years. As you recall, two of the individuals that were arrested as part of that spy network takedown lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had been investigated by the Boston division of the FBI for many years. So we've been a part of that investigation for so long, and to see it successfully resolved in a very, very positive manner for the United States government, that was tremendously satisfying. And certainly the arrest of James Whitey Bulger and Catherine Grieg back on June 22nd, 2011, a very significant event as well. I can't discuss that in too much detail because of the pending litigation in Boston right now, but certainly that was a very significant career event as well. And certainly, you know, the most recently and tragically, the Boston Marathon bombing investigation, certainly that was a very significant portion of my career. Probably the first week of that career was the most intense week of my entire 26-year FBI career. So I look back on that really as a very significant moment in my career as well.
Wow. We'll talk more in depth about those cases that you just mentioned later on in the program. But when you look back at these cases that you were a part of, is there any one in particular that was difficult for you personally to deal with. I mean, you have an intense job that, requires you to be very much involved in, some intense investigations.
Sure.
Anything that in particular that made you lose sleep or just affected you personally while you were going through these?
Well, I think most significantly, Laura, during the first week of the Boston Marathon bombing investigation back in April, that week of April 15th, we were all shocked and horrified by the magnitude of the crimes that had been committed in what we call our city. I'm a native of Massachusetts, so I even though I don't reside in Boston per se, I consider it to be my city, and we were shocked by the magnitude and horror of those tragic events that day, and the fact that such a cherished athletic event as the Boston Marathon would be targeted by those seeking to do our country harm and to have a loss of life and hundreds of injuries. That was horrifying to all of us, and so that really touched me particularly and drove us very intensely, particularly during the first week of the investigation, to do everything we could to arrest those who have now been charged for these crimes, and really that was very significant.
Yeah, what do you think that you're going to miss most about this job, your life here in Massachusetts? What do you think the biggest changes are going to be for you?
Well, the thing that I'll miss the most are the people of the FBI and our law enforcement and United States Attorney's Office partners across the 4 states that we're responsible for in the FBI's Boston Division. In addition to Massachusetts, I have a great many partners and friends down in Rhode Island, in New Hampshire, and in Maine as well. So really across those four of the 6 New England states, I will miss the people the most, and I'll miss certainly the wonderful employees, brave, hardworking, dedicated employees of the FBI's Boston Division are certainly ones who will be missed by me very, very much.
And you wanted to make your rounds around the state before you concluded your career with the FBI. Why is this something that you wanted to do? Well,
I wanted to really just touch base, and it means a lot to me to be out in Springfield here today as well. Springfield, of course, is my hometown. From Long Meadow, but the Springfield area is my hometown. I'm a 1978 graduate of Cathedral High School here in Springfield, so I have deep roots here in Western Massachusetts. So it meant a lot for me to be able to come out to Western Massachusetts again and really thank our law enforcement partners for their tremendous partnership, and to thank the media as well for their support and cooperation during the 3 years that I have been here in Boston.
Well, we're happy that you made us one of your stops today. This is great. And I do want to talk a little bit more in depth about some of these incidents that you were a part of, but we will take a short break before that. So we will continue our conversation with Richard Delorier after this. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We are talking to FBI Special Agent in charge of the Boston office, Richard Delorier, who has announced that he is retiring. And you are taking off after dealing with some very intense situations in Massachusetts, most recently the Boston Marathon bombing in particular. An amazing week that played out, really, and amazing in the terms that it was devastating, but also pretty heroic from what we saw. From your end, what was that week like for you from when that first began?
Well, Laura, it was probably the most intense week of my career. From the moment we learned about the bombings, I was at a meeting in my office. We actually had a Holocaust Remembrance Day celebration that afternoon, and my BlackBerry went off about 5 minutes before 3 o'clock, and saying that 2 explosions had occurred near the Boston Marathon finish line. And of course, we were shocked and horrified by that news. We immediately ran downstairs to some televisions in our office just to learn what was going on. And when we saw the magnitude of what had happened, all of us were just in shock and with horror. And a few minutes after that, Boston Police Commissioner Davis contacted me on my cell phone and said, "Rick, I don't know what we have here, but we've had 2 large explosions near the finish line of the marathon. We have some very, very severe injuries. We have some fatalities. Send whatever resources you can, send your SWAT teams, and send your special agent bomb technicians." And of course we did that right away. And so that's how that's the story of how it started for us. And then we stood up our command post and activated all our personnel immediately.
For us, it really takes on a different meaning when we have, an incident that happens, and then when we start labeling it as a terrorist attack.
Sure,
How does that happen? How does one classify an event like that?
I think it's just a common sense process. As soon as you see something like that, you certainly have strong suspicions that it likely was a terrorist attack. But until you actually get out to the scene where the crimes occurred and begin to take a look at the potential evidence and the victims and things like that, you don't really have a certainty. So we strongly suspected that first evening that it was, but and then when we determined that it very likely was a terrorist attack, the FBI took the lead in the investigation through its counterterrorism authority here inside the United States.
Yeah. We watched a lot of this play out on live TV, everything from the hunt and, right after the bombings in particular as well. How much is going on behind the scenes that we may not know? How does this work? How do you get together and determine what the game plan is? What is going on behind the scenes?
The first thing that happens is the law enforcement principals and the United States Attorney's Office touch base with each other. And we decided that we were going to have a press conference early that evening of Monday, April 15th at the Westin Hotel, the Westin Copley Plaza in Boston, which was not far from where the crimes had occurred earlier that day. So we all came together and we had a press conference to communicate to the citizens of Boston and to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and really the country and the world what we knew at that very, very early stage about what had happened, but to demonstrate that we had a very solid law enforcement team working together already in the very earliest stages of the investigation, and that we would leave no stone unturned in pursuing those who were responsible for that. And I think at the press conference that opening evening, I think I used the words that we will go to the ends of the earth to find those responsible for these despicable crimes, and that's truly what we did that first week.
Maybe you can't answer this, but it seemed almost strategy when the lockdown from the city was lifted, and then I don't even think it was an hour later when we started hearing that somebody had been caught, and that was there some kind of strategy to get people out of their homes to start helping out looking? You know what I mean?
I don't think so, Laura. I think that was really just an alert citizen who noticed something suspicious in his backyard, who contacted the police and contacted the local authorities, and that's really what allowed us to pursue that avenue of investigation in Watertown that afternoon. So I can't go into a lot of the specifics of the investigation, but it's really just an alert member of the citizenry contacting law enforcement and reporting something suspicious. And that's what we were doing the prior evening when we held the big press conference at the Sheraton Hotel on the evening of Thursday 18th, where we displayed the photos of those individuals who at the time we were characterizing as suspect number 1 and suspect number 2. We were soliciting the American public's assistance and support to help us identify these individuals in the photographs so that we could get them off the streets as quickly as possible. So the American public is always the FBI and law enforcement's best ally in the fight against crime, and we were seeking the American public's assistance that afternoon, and we received the American public's assistance numerous times throughout that week. Were you surprised that wrapped up in a week? What does that timeline look like compared to, I don't know. I don't know what you would compare it to, but was a week pretty quick actually to catch somebody, or how did that? Well, without going into a lot of specific investigative details, Laura, we marshaled a tremendous amount of resources very, very quickly. We surged resources up from FBI headquarters down to Washington, from a variety of other FBI field divisions across the country. Our state and locals partners surged resources as well. We had a great team. There was no bickering. Decisions were made collaboratively in close coordination with the Office of the United States Attorney. And when everybody pulls together, works as a cohesive team at the federal, state, and local level, good things usually happen. And we had a mantra during the investigation, and we still do have that right now. It's one team, one fight. We were one team fighting one fight to find those responsible for the horrific crimes which occurred in Boston on April 15th. And we're satisfied that within about 101 hours of the crimes being committed, we were able to arrest the individual who has now been charged in the investigation. And I know moving forward, a lot of people wonder if they acted alone or if there are more people out there. Maybe you can't say, but is there an investigation into others? Is this something that's ongoing? That's probably something I can't go into much detail on, Laura, because our investigation certainly will go on until those who have been charged until the litigation is complete regarding those who have been charged. So I wouldn't want to speculate right now, but it's an active and ongoing investigation.
Yeah. And did we learn any lessons while we were doing that? I mean, we hear a lot that it was very fluid and it moved in a graceful way. But do you think that there was anything that we've learned that we may take on to,
Well, I think it's the essential thing that I learned was to have great law enforcement partnerships in place before a crisis happens, so that if and when a crisis does happen, as it did in Boston on April 15th, all the law enforcement principals can talk to each other on a first-name basis. Fortunately, I and Colonel Albin from the State Police, Commissioner Davis from Boston PD, we all knew each other very, very well before this crisis occurred. So we came together very quickly as one team, and many other components of the FBI's Boston Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is running the investigation right now, came together very rapidly and very quickly and as a unified team. And when that happens, good things usually happen in an investigation. When you put talented people together, they're working well together, they're not working at cross purposes to each other, good things happen.
Okay, well, it really was a remarkable week, that's for sure, but that's not the only thing you've been working on. We have a lot of other things to talk about. James Whitey Bulger, a number of other cases, but we will take a short break and then we'll get to those. So we will continue our conversation after this. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we are talking to FBI's Special Agent in charge of investigations in the Boston office, Richard Delorier, who has announced that he is retiring, but he is talking to us first today about his remarkable career, a very long career that is coming to an end here in Boston, but you are moving on to do big things as well with another company. I want to talk about the capture of James Whitey Bulger. This is another one of those big cases. We were just talking about the Boston Marathon, but this is going on right now as well. This, for you, as somebody who watched him, on the run, one of the FBI's most wanted, and then to see him captured, what is that like for you?
Well, I think I can't go into too many details about the Bulger case right now, Laura, because of the ongoing litigation in Boston right now, but I certainly would say that the arrest of Mr. Bulger and Ms. Grieg back on June 22nd, 2011 was a very significant accomplishment. Anytime you arrest an FBI top 10 fugitive, it's a very, very significant accomplishment. And so we were very delighted that justice is now being served in that investigation. I've said that several times publicly subsequent to Mr. Bulger's arrest, is that we're delighted that justice is being served.
What was, I guess, the critical factor of capturing him? What is important in these cases? What kind of information to get out there so that the public can help you out? This was all the way across the country. I guess, what do you think really helped in that?
Well, I think generally speaking, Laura, and what we used in the Boston Marathon bombing investigation, and what we've used in the Isabella Stewart Gardner art theft investigation, is we appeal to the American public for assistance in solving crimes. As I mentioned before, the American public is the FBI and law enforcement's best ally when it comes to fighting crime. And appealing to the public and providing them as much information as possible to allow them to assist you is something that the FBI has used in many different investigations, and we've been, I think, very successful at it in Boston over the past several years. So it's a tried and true technique that is used in a variety of high-profile investigations, and it's worked well for us.
Very good. And you mentioned earlier at the very beginning of the program the Russian spy ring was one case in particular that you're fond of, and that it's something that you'll always remember. Talk to us about how this maybe changed how we view, security, any sort of safety issues like that.
Sure. Well, I think it goes to show that foreign governments will attempt to exploit us for their own national security purposes, and they will try to engage at times in illegal activities here inside the United States that violate U.S. law, and we have to investigate that crime as diligently as we do any other crime here inside the United States. So the Russian spy investigation was a very long-term, sensitive, extremely complex investigation which spanned many, many years, and I think it's one of my proudest accomplishments was being a part of that team that investigated the two individuals in Boston who were convicted of the crimes, and also as part of a larger team that investigated this network across the United States. And in my prior position, prior to coming to Boston, I was one of the leaders nationally of the FBI team that was responsible for the overall arrest of this network and dismantlement of this network here in the United States. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment. It was a very, very significant investigation.
Yeah, and how long was that? That went on for a number of years.
Close to a decade, for
wow.
quite some time it went on for. And really, it was just a very, very complex investigation, a very, very sensitive and compartmentalized investigation until the charging documents were unsealed in the Southern District of New York. So we were very proud. We had a great teamwork in that investigation.
Yeah.
And so we were very proud of our results.
It really is incredible just to think of working on something for that long and having it come full circle, for sure.
Yes.
You must have some loose ends that are still need to be tied up. You know, how does this transition work now? As you step down, what sort of loose ends need to be tied, I guess, before you're finished?
Well, Director Mueller will select a successor to me sometime soon, and that will be publicly announced. And I will be in touch with that individual, either whoever he or she might be. And I will be talking to them to making sure I inform them of the key law enforcement relationships that they need to make across our 4 states, and really the key media relationships as well, of media members that we have worked so well with in the 3 years that I have been SAC. And I certainly will emphasize to them the importance of coming out to Western Massachusetts, to my hometown, really getting to know the great, wonderful law enforcement professionals at the federal, state, and local level that we have here in Western Massachusetts, but also to meet our key media and liaison contacts as well.
Okay, what are you looking forward to most in your new job as you take off? I mean, it's going to be quite a change for you.
It will be quite a change, Laura. I'm looking forward to taking the knowledge, the skills, the abilities that I acquired through my 26.5 years in the FBI and doing my very best to apply them to the private sector for the benefit of my new employer, Penske Corporation, which is a truly outstanding, world-class organization, and I'm honored to be joining them, and I'm hoping to use my skills for their benefit.
Okay, and we are at the end, but anything that you'd just like to say to Western Mass before you take off on your new adventure?
I'd like to just thank our great law enforcement partners out here, from the State Police to the Springfield Police Department, the Holyoke Police Department, Chicopee Police Department, West Springfield Police Department, and a variety of other police departments across Western Massachusetts who are just great partners of ours. The FBI can never be effective working alone. We rely upon the partnership of our federal, state, and local partners to succeed. And I want to thank everybody out here in the law enforcement community for their great partnership with our Springfield resident agency. I'm deeply appreciative for their friendship and partnership.
Richard Delorier, we certainly will miss you, but we look forward to seeing all the big things that you have ahead of you, and we are very proud of you.
Great.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thanks for joining us on the program. We are going to have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. After overseeing many significant cases resulting in arrests and convictions, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Boston office, Richard Delorier, is retiring. And we have just spent the last half hour talking about some of the bigger cases he's been a part of. We talked about the Boston Marathon. We talked about the capture of James Whitey Bulger and others. We do want to thank him for being here and wish him well in his future endeavors. That is our program for today. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at WWLP.com. From all of us here at 22 News, thanks for watching. We wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.